Chapter 3, Section 2, the New England Colonies. The main idea behind this section is that religion influenced the settlement and government of the New England colonies. The major pull factor for those who settled in New England, right, was religious freedom from the persecution they had faced back in England and in Europe. Why it matters today. The Puritans who settled in the New England colonies had a very strong work ethic, and their religious beliefs influence American culture up to today. Key terms and names that you will want to pay attention for in this section are Pilgrims, Mayflower Compact, Puritans, Great Migration, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, Roger Williams, Anne Hutchinson, and King Philip's War. Throughout the section and this video, it would be highly advisable that you have your notes available through the Google Classroom and answer the questions and take notes that accompany this video and the section. One American story. In 1605, Englishmen captured and enslaved a Native American named Squanto and took him to England. Squanto returned to America in 1619. There he discovered that his Pawtuxet tribe had been killed by disease. In 1621, Squanto set about helping the English plant crops on tribal lands. Colonist William Bradford made the following comment. A voice from the past. Squanto was a special instrument sent of God for the colonists' good beyond their expectations. He directed them how to set their corn, where to take fish, and how to procure other commodities, and was also their pilot to bring them to unknown places. William Bradford, quoted in the source, The Pilgrim Reader. So when we analyze this document, we want to take a minute to do our SOAPS analysis. Okay, and that's our acronym. Okay, so who was the speaker in this document? Okay, that would be William Bradford. What was the occasion? Occasion. Okay, the occasion would have been in 1621. That's when he said it, and where would have been in the Plymouth colony where the Pilgrims had settled. Who is the audience that William Bradford is addressing in this document? Well, we've got a couple choices. He could be writing it as a letter back to England, so the people back in England might be his audience. He could be intentionally keeping a journal record for himself, or he could be intentionally keeping a historical record because he knows the events he's taking place in is a historical event, so he's intentionally keeping a record for, we would say, posterity or for people in the future. What is his purpose in writing this and creating this document? Is it to entertain, inform, or persuade? I would say, and hopefully you come up with, it would be to inform his audience, okay, how Squanto helped the Pilgrims, and that brings us to subject. How did they help them? Okay, the subject is how Squanto helped them to where to plant their corn, the best places to go fishing, how to get other commodities or other items that they would need, all right, and how to bring them to other unknown places to the Pilgrims that would be helpful for them in their survival. In this section, you will learn about the Pilgrims and Puritans, their relations with the Native Americans, and their settlement of New England colonies. The voyage on the Mayflower. In the early 1500s, King Henry VIII of England, that's this handsome gentleman right here, broke that country's ties with the Catholic Church and established the Church of England, an official state church under his control. In the early 1600s, a religious group called the Separatists called for a total break with the Church of England. They thought it was still too much like the Catholic Church. The reason that King Henry broke from the Church of England is because he asked the Pope, who was the head of the Catholic Church, for a divorce from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. The Pope eventually granted him this divorce, and he then married Anne Boleyn, who was his second wife. Anne Boleyn was unable to give him a son, and he wanted to divorce again, and the Pope said absolutely not. So King Henry decided to just ultimately behead his wife, and then create his own church, which was also linked and part of the English government at the same time. The Pilgrims were a separatist group. King James attacked them for rejecting England's official church. To escape this harsh treatment, the Pilgrims fled to Holland, also known as the Netherlands, a country known for its acceptance of different opinions. Eventually, the Pilgrims became dissatisfied with life in Holland. They felt their children were accepting too much of the Dutch culture and losing their English identity. They approached the Virginia Company and asked if they could settle in America as a distinct body by themselves. The Virginia Company arranged for them to settle on land within its boundaries on the eastern coast of North America. On a cold, raw November day in 1620, a ship called the Mayflower arrived off Cape Cod on the Massachusetts coast. Blown north of its course, the Mayflower landed in an area that John Smith had mapped and called New England, because it wasn't Old England. They were very creative back then. They landed at a site that had been named Plymouth. Now, historians actually debate whether or not they actually were blown off course, or if they intentionally settled outside of the land area that was governed by the charter because they intentionally wanted to have their own government and not have to follow the rules of the English government that was controlled by the charter within Virginia. But because the Pilgrims landed outside the limits of the Virginia Company, right, as we just explained, the charter did not apply. For the sake of order, the men aboard the Mayflower signed an agreement called the Mayflower Compact. In it, they vowed to obey laws agreed upon for the good of the colony. The Mayflower Compact helped establish the idea of self-government and majority rule. Unfortunately, only the men got to decide on the rules on the self-government. The women were not included. The Pilgrims found Plymouth. Like the early settlers of Jamestown, the Pilgrims in Plymouth endured a starving time. That first winter, disease and death struck with a fury that the living were scarce able to bury the dead. Half the group had died by spring. However, energy, hope, and help returned. One day, a Native American walked up to a group of colonists, and to their astonishment, he called out, "Welcome, Englishmen!" This was Samoset, a Pemaquid who had learned to speak English from European fishermen. Samoset introduced the settlers to another Native American named Squanto, a Pawtuxet who also spoke English. The Pilgrims had angered the Native Americans by taking their corn. Squanto acted as an interpreter between the Pilgrims and Chief Massasoit. He helped them to negotiate a peace treaty and showed them how to plant, hunt, and fish. While their crops grew, the colonists began trading with the Native Americans for furs and prepared lumber to ship back to England in order to make a profit. Sometime in the fall, no one knows exactly when, the Plymouth settlement celebrated the blessings of a good harvest by holding a 3-day feast. This is known as the First Thanksgiving. This Thanksgiving came to represent the peace that existed at that time between the Native Americans and Pilgrims, and also the victory that the Pilgrims and the Native Americans had accomplished over a rival tribe that they used the English weapons, the guns, or the muskets, to totally annihilate and take out that tribe, which most textbooks will not tell you about. Anyway, thanks to the help of Squanto and other Native Americans, the Pilgrims learned to survive in their new environment. Soon, more people would sail to New England seeking religious freedom. The Puritans come to Massachusetts Bay. Between about 1630 and 1640, a religious group called the Puritans left England to escape bad treatment by King James I. Unlike the Separatists, who wanted to break away from the Church of England, the Puritans wanted to reform, meaning change, or purify its practices, thus their name, the Puritans. By the thousands, Puritan families left for America. Their leaving is known as the Great Migration. Many thousands of Puritans left their homeland to found new settlements around the world. Of these settlers, about 20,000 crossed the Atlantic Ocean to New England. Many Puritan merchants had invested in the Massachusetts Bay Company. In 1629, the company received a royal charter to settle land in New England. In 1630, 11 well-supplied ships carried about 1,000 passengers to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Unlike earlier colonists, the Puritans were well prepared and did not suffer a starving time. John Winthrop was the colony's Puritan governor. He stated that the new colony would be a commonwealth, a community in which people would work together for the good of the whole. So here we can see where Plymouth was, and that's the Pilgrims settlement. And here in Salem and Boston and Massachusetts Bay Colony, all right, up north, this is where the majority of the Puritans settled. Okay, so they were two separate religious groups with two separate settlements and two separate colonies. Primary source document, A Voice from the Past. So shall we keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. 10 of us will be able to resist 1,000 of our enemies. For we must consider that we shall be a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are on us. John Winthrop from a Model of Christian Charity. So what I'd like you to do now as we wrap up this video is take a minute and complete your SOAPS analysis on this document. Who is the speaker? Think about what is the occasion. Who is the audience for the speaker? What is the speaker's purpose? And what is the subject or the overall main idea behind this document? Right? Take a minute and think. It would be a very good idea to pause the video, think about it, and come back with your answer. Okay, so hopefully you were able to come up with your answers for your SOAPS analysis. You should have come up with the speaker was John Winthrop. Okay, the occasion isn't specific here to us in terms of when, but we can assume it is after 1630 if you went back and listened to a little bit earlier in the video or were looking in your textbook. And where was it? Well, that would have been in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Who is his audience? His audience would have been most likely, okay, since he's saying we here, so shall we keep the unity of the Spirit. Okay, for we must consider that we shall be a city upon a hill, that he is speaking to his congregation, that he's speaking to other Puritans. Okay, it could be Puritans throughout the world, but most likely the Puritans in Massachusetts Bay Colony. What is his purpose? To entertain, inform, or persuade? I'd most likely go with persuade in this case. He's trying to establish and persuade the Puritans to make sure they live like true Christians, okay, that they serve as a model of Christian charity. All right, so what does he want them to do? He's saying ultimately that if they need to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace, be peaceful, okay, if they do, 10 of them will be able to resist 1,000 of their enemies. All right, that they are a city upon a hill, meaning that if they are the city that is sitting up on the hill, people need to look up at them because the eyes of all people are on us. They are examples, and they need to provide a positive example for all Puritans and all Christians in that Massachusetts Bay Colony with John Winthrop as the leader. All right, so this is where we're going to end the video for today. Please make sure that you have filled in the questions and notes that correlate to this video and the first Part 1 of Chapter 3, Section 2, and we'll see you in class tomorrow.